Thank you, Rajesh, and thanks a lot to you for inviting me to this forum. In fact, it's like coming into a lion's den and talking about something, right? So you are all practicing professionals in this field and following the Semco style and for a long time. So whatever people management or process management practices that I had done are by trial and error method. Basically by putting myself in the shoes of a team that is managed by me. So would I like to work for that team? Will I be happy being a team member in the team? Right. So in that kind of a yardstick, right? That's what I have used to sort of figure out some of the people practices. And one good thing I realized is, for example, when I started in 95, from the very first hire we made, right, we naturally started following what is later documented as agile methodology or agile process. And similarly, whatever I believe are common sense and good for people, which will keep people, have the freedom, feel the responsibility, and have the sense of ownership, and have a sense of belonging, and things like that. Those are what are in Semco style or in what we follow. So our entire goal has always been, how do we instill that sense of ownership in people? In fact, when I started GoFrugal, in the retail, especially in the sole proprietorship market that we serviced in the initial years, many retailers used to call me, and their single biggest complaint is every one of your employee talks to me as if he owns the company. Right? Because they expect people to be submissive and say yes sir and agree to whatever they say, and and when they say I'll talk to your owner, at least act as if they are afraid. Right? When they don't see any of that, they will call me and tell me, why is it that everybody talks like a owner? I am a owner here, you are a owner, we will have certain discussion. And so I used to take a lot of pride in that, because I used to tell them it is very easy to make them feel like an employee. It is very hard for us to make them feel like a owner, right? So that has been the sort of the driving force, and I would say we have been in this journey. I have personally been in this journey now for more than 25 years, and I am still learning, because what worked in 96 definitely doesn't work in 2016. And what worked in 2016 is not working in 2021. Right? So because, people are evolving so fast now, and their needs and their aspirations and, what gives them the sense of belonging and sense of ownership, everything is changing. So I am still learning. And, in this session, I'll be very happy to share some of my thoughts and what we practice, and also have lots of questions from you and suggestions from you, so that it is, there is enough give and take here. And I also take away a lot of things from this.
Before you get on to your thoughts on the people side, Kumar, a few words about GoFrugal, what, your expanse, how, what does it do, how much has it grown? That'll be great.
Okay, sure. So, see, GoFrugal was founded in 2004, end of 2004. And if you recall, at that time, there were talks about foreign direct investment in retail. And there were talk about the corporate retail coming into India. And, so I felt, the state of retail, they were not using much of technology, and they were not even in a position to use technology. So in that kind of environment, the retailers, business or livelihood is threatened. So our goal is how can we give, software solutions and technology solutions to these small businesses, whether they are in product retail or service retail like restaurant or, distribution businesses. How can we equip them so that they can fight with the, whether multinational retailers who come in or corporate retailers in India. So that is the entire purpose with which we started the company. I felt the environment was also very, highly suitable for this, small business to actually take on the big guys, because when a company like Walmart grew in the US, US supply chain was not mature, knowledge was very expensive, technology was even more expensive, and capital was very scarce and things like that. Whereas when we take 2004 or 2021, knowledge has become a commodity. People who have time, they can listen to videos, they can do Google searches, they can learn. The technology has become a commodity. Technology has become cheap. Even capital availability has become a lot more, easy to access capital. And whereas the local, the small businesses have their relationship with customers, their knowledge or intimate knowledge of their consumer taste, and they have, in all the markets, they own the real estate. So they don't have the high, rental for that real estate. So these are all benefits for them. So in 2004, my thought process is it's advantage small business if they really get the technology and they start using it. So I thought, it will be a, a very good, business to build, as an India first business, right? Indian market first. So that's the reason I started in 2004 with GoFrugal. And, over the years, definitely, when we first approached retailers with, how they can use, the internet, computing and mobility and all together, right? There was not much reception. In fact, we found that, most customers, in fact, in our support, I have overheard some conversation like our support agent will tell the customer, sir, can you, please move the mouse, right? The customer would have bought a new computer with a mouse, and he will lift the mouse and keep it in another place, because that's the only move they know. They don't scratch anything on the surface, right? So when we have to send a support executive to the customer, and we have found that when we tell the customer move the mouse, they are actually lifting it from one place and keeping it in another place. So they don't know how to move the mouse, right? And when our support agent tells them, sir, please go to D drive, customer will say, I'm alone in the shop, so I can't go now. Right? So these are some usual conversations. So from there, the customer really, we don't have any such issues in the last 5 or 10 years. So we have seen tremendous, learning and familiarity with the technology for the retailers. So that is a, a great thing. And in terms of size of business, we serve about 30,000 retailers now. We started as India as the first market kind of a business. We serve customers in about 75 countries now, almost all the African countries, the Middle East and South Asian countries and all. And over the next few months, we also plan to launch in the developed world, launch our solution in the North American and European markets also. So in terms of people, we are about 350 people, small, and we keep growing. So I think with the current market conditions, in the last 3-4 years, we have been growing at 30 to 40% average per year. And we see that in the next 4 or 5 years, we can grow, almost about 100% year on year. So that's the kind of growth and potential we see in the market today.
Truly a made in India for the world kind of a product. Brilliant.
Yeah, that's what we want it to be. Currently, it is in part. I tell people that wherever we are there in mostly developed countries and poorer nations. Right? Wherever customers can't pay, that's where we do business. Yeah. So we plan to launch it in the developed world.
Awesome. Very nice.
Yeah. So I thank you, Rajesh, for asking me to tell more about the company, because that gives me some context to explain to you the people-specific challenges that we have to address. Right? See, for some reason, for most of our professionals, there is I would say there is not much pride in working for a smaller company. Right? When a company is in the making, right? Most very talented and skilled professionals who are in demand in the market, they don't take pride in working for a smaller company. And definitely there are, like for example, when people resign, people say, I got a good job. Right? And that's the most irritating answer you can hear as an entrepreneur, because then you wonder whether you are not giving them a good job so far. Right? People have aspirations, and most of the time those aspirations are like bigger is the best. Right? The company is a larger company, then I can probably do a better job there, or things like that. Right? So our challenges have been, how do we make people have pride? So I would say the first learning I had probably back in 97, 98 is that passion and pride is what leads to progress. So how do we create that passion in people? If they want to do the best work, they want to enjoy their work. How do we make people take some pride in their work? Right? And because if these two are done, then there is definitely progress. So all the practices we do are to make them feel proud. Right? In fact, when we give ownership to people, one thing I always tell people is, when you look back, you have to feel proud. Right? You don't look back with a sense of regret. Right? Because what can give you proud, that pride is, you did your best. Right? You tried honestly, you tried sincerely, right? And the second most important thing is we celebrate failures as long as we learn from it and we won't repeat that mistake. So these are things that, like even when we have lost customers, right, because of some stupid or some costly mistakes that we have made. Because remember, our company, from 96, from the time I started, it has been built with freshers. So I can say from 96 till today in our businesses, 80 to 90% of all our hires are freshers. In the initial years, it is more like 90-95%. In the later years, it's at least around 80%. So when we hire freshers, we have to, the only thing they have is their youthful energy and, hard work and commitment. So if those are there, how do we create that, space and give them the time so that they learn and they make mistakes and they basically, make you proud and they also feel proud. So that's the whole journey for us.
Yeah. Sukumar, so a few things which I've noticed, I looked at your website and we've had a few conversations. Right from the time an employee joins your company, I think he or she starts feeling the difference, right? And I love the practice, which I'd love for the team to hear from you. What does an employee go through the first day of the job in GoFrugal?
Yeah, see, again, one of the first thing, probably in 96 or 97, I banned the use of. So we say learning, because in training, somehow it makes the trainer responsible for, making sure everybody gets it, right? Whereas in learning, the responsibility or ownership for learning is on the learner. So, this is the first kind of a shock we give people, because most people, when they join us, they expect us to sort of handhold them and put them in a classroom and teach them and conduct an exam and things like that, right? And we don't do that. So on day one, we ask people, for example, my mandate to our HR team has always been like, we complete all the whatever joining formalities are there within a first hour of joining, so that the first day should be a memorable and enjoyable day, and it doesn't go in form filling and getting access card and all the other things, right? So a lot of the forms that they have to fill, everything is sent out well in advance, so that and we ask the people to fill and come, so that within probably 30 minutes to 1 hour, people can start working, right? So that is the first thing. That means they hit their desk and they go to their reporting manager and meet their team in an hour of joining. So that itself cuts down a lot of anxiety or boredom in the new joining. And the second thing we do is we tell them that on their first day of work, they have to contribute something to their team and to the company. That means the first day doesn't end without making some contribution to the team or to the company. So that, see, again, pride and dignity is there only when there is a sense of contribution. So if there is a sense of entitlement or a sense of, I did nothing in the office today, the first thing that gets affected is the sense of dignity and pride. So we tell them, every day, you want to go home happy, you have a sense of contribution. In fact, that's the kind of people we want, right? If there are people who feel entitled or who feel they can come warm the chair and go and they will get paid, they will find that, this is a company where they can't survive doing that. So so this is how we create a sort of a self-selecting environment, right? So on first day, we set the expectation that you have to contribute something. So all the things we do in the induction is targeted at, for example, on the first afternoon or first evening itself, how can they do something to meaningfully contribute to the team? So to give you an example, if somebody joins in our online sales team, so like let's say they join at 9 a.m. and they are with their team at 10 a.m. By 10:15 or 10:20, after the introductions with the team, they sit down to work. And they will hear an induction video in our learning management tool, learning management app that we have. So my talk, so they have to see my face and listen to me for about 30 minutes, where I talk to them about the culture of the place and what we expect from them, and some basic things like contributing to the team on day one and this daily report. They have to send their daily report and the importance of daily report. And we also use a few TED Talks. So one of the very important TED Talks we show to people is a TED Talk by Margaret Heffernan. And it's titled some Super Chicken something, right? In that, she talks about the importance of teamwork, right? So however smart you are, people who basically act very smart and, think that they are bigger than the team, right? She calls them super chicken. She gives some examples of researches done in Purdue University and other places on how, when you put many super chickens in one place, they basically self-destruct, right? Whereas when you put all average chickens, their productivity keeps improving because they help each other, right? This is a real research done by Purdue University, as per Margaret Heffernan, right? So we tell them that so that we make sure, these people understand that being a team player is very important, and trusting every team member and respecting the team member are very important. So those are the things, a couple of things they do in the first hour and a half or two, and ask questions. So after this, we give them recordings of, for example, if it is online sales, there will be recording of existing sales calls. So we give them 10 such existing sales calls, depending on the role, right? If it is a field salesman, we give them recording of some field cold call, right? And we ask them to listen to them, pick what they learned from it, what problems they found in them. Because when somebody else is making a cold call, you can also say in this place, this was not done well, or this was not done right, and things like that. So they do that for a couple of hours. And then we ask them to sit with a senior person who is doing these calls. Right now, they are handling the calls. So they observe that for an hour and they ask questions. And in the last 1 or 2 hours, they start we give them about 10 customers to call. And in the last hour or two, they make these 10 or 15 calls. So on first day, people who say they love talking to strangers, they love talking to people and things like that, even they start shivering when they have to make a real call to a real stranger, right? But on the first day, when they make the call, they either show up on the second day to work, or they tell us this is not for them, right? And or they continue, right? But typically, if I take an online sales executive, this is how the day goes, so that in the last couple of hours, they make a real call to a real customer. And if it's a field salesperson, the second half of the day, they really walk the market with an experienced person, where they observe this person doing the job of doing cold calls in the first half of the afternoon. And later in the evening, the newbie does the cold call and the experienced man observes and gives feedback. So on day one, in every role, irrespective of the role, we make sure they get a taste of the work they have to do and where they are, and so that they get appetite. See, people see, my basic thing is, when you see other people do something, you start believing. Right? So when I think Carl Lewis broke the 10-second record, it took so many years, but the moment people got the belief that they can do 100 meters under 10 seconds, so many people have started running it under 10 seconds. Right? When somebody tells me in theory, you can ride a bicycle, I won't believe it. But when I see in front of my house so many people riding bicycle, even if I fall down the first 10 times, I know it is possible because I have seen people doing it. So that is why, our system has a strong element of, first you see other people working, with the recordings or whatever. Then you observe very closely how people are doing that work.
Yep.
And then you do that work under somebody else's supervision. So that's how we go.
So Kumar, so clearly the point you made about pride comes from a sense of contribution, not from a sense of entitlement, and that you incorporate right from day one of an employee, right? And that's really great to know. And you also mentioned about a daily report, and I heard you mention, people when people submit daily reports, they talk about emotions. Can you elaborate a little on that?
Sure. So our daily report, see, the first thing is, you come to work happy and you go back home happy. We don't want office to be responsible for your unhappiness. Right? So if you fought with your wife, or you fought with your kids, or something, with your parents at home, right? Leave that, when you enter the office, so that you are happy inside the office. And, and we don't want office to contribute to your unhappiness, because people spend more time in the office. People have more, friendships and relationships and all inside the office. Because see, today in any modern profession, people spend 10 hours to 11 hours, right? In office or with people in the office and things like that, right? Which is maybe 60-70% of the time they are awake, right? And do something. So that means we definitely don't want office to be the reason for unhappiness. So that is a first principle we adopt. In fact, for many years, the only thing I managed in the office, the only KPI is measure of happiness in the office. Right? That actually helped identify a lot of people issues, process issues, technology issues, and a lot of other challenges and resolve them. So, in fact, so this coming back to this daily report. So what we do is, in fact, one important thing I missed telling you, even before they listen to my video, we asked them to listen to a video on Anapana. So I have been a student of Vipassana for the last 7 years, and I really felt Vipassana had been a life-changing experience. So from the time I came back from Vipassana, there is a meditation technique called Anapana that helps in making your mind very calm. Vipassana is the meditation to get a balanced mind, and this Anapana is a meditation to get a calm mind. So if people come with tension, maybe they would have, even had some quarrel in the road, and they might be walking into the office with stress. So we encourage our people to do 10 minutes of Anapana. That is a meditation technique where you observe your breath so that you start feeling calm. And almost all our meetings when we were in office, when we meet more than 5-6 people, the meeting starts with 10 minutes of Anapana, so that people are more calm in the meeting room. And when you are calm, you start to listen a lot better. So at least every meeting I used to do for the last 6 or 7 years, during the pandemic time, the meeting starts with the 10 minutes of Anapana, so that people don't say I didn't listen to you. Right? So that kind of practice we have. This is very important, right, for us. This happiness first is very important for us. So in our daily report, when people work and report things at the end of the day, right, we actually, the first thing we ask is, how was their emotion for the day? So whether they were happy or they are sad or they were not satisfied or, not happy or whatever they feel, we ask them to report it honestly. And every, see, people work on multiple projects. And most of our, people may belong to a certain team, but the senior they will be involved in more cross-functional efforts, where the work they do will be involving collaboration with multiple other teams. So depending on the seniority of the person, people may be working on one project to up to 6 or 7 projects in a day. So we also ask them to report their emotion in each one of their project like this, so that we understand. Even if some people say I'm confused because I'm not clear about my role in the project, or people will say I am disappointed because I didn't, this expectation was not known to me, or somebody threw a surprise at me in the end, right? So those things help us, in understanding what, the expectation mismatches, right? In fact, nobody comes to office thinking that I want to fail today, right? Everyone has aspiration. Their aspiration can be different. We may have some people in Go Frugal whose aspiration is not to be in Go Frugal, or not to be in a role that they are doing in Go Frugal. Like somebody may want to be an artist, but maybe working as a software engineer because they can't make a living out of an artist, right, today. But like that, there can be mismatches. But, at least whatever work they are asked to do, or whatever work they take responsibility to do they have clarity on the scope? Do they understand it clearly? And when they finish the work, are we only making comments with respect to the scope of the work, right? Instead of always sort of, pushing the goalpost out. Because it's very easy when I am experienced, when I do a project review, I can always tell what is not done instead of appreciating what is done. Right? So there is a large emphasis on appreciations. Right? Let's first celebrate what is done, and then talk about what are the deficiencies in the agreed scope of work, or how the scope can be increased to do something better. If scope can be increased, then let us acknowledge that only by doing this work we have learned something more can be done. rather than pointing it out as a shortcoming of the person who did the work. Right?
So clearly, the importance given to happiness at work, emotions at work, as well as bringing that out so that you can unearth real issues and solve those. In the chat, I already have quite a few questions. So now one question is you said first KPI you established was happiness. Is there a way that you measure it? And how often do you measure it, Kumar? Harini, do you want to voice that, or is that?
It's perfect. Perfect.
Yeah.
See, there are certain things that can't be measured, right? In the sense that, I can't say people are 89% happy today or something like that. So we don't have a measure like that, right? But generally, we call all our managers as coaches. So we don't use the word manager internally, right? Coaches. And, we ask them to give utmost importance to the emotion being reported, right? So we generally know, right, when people report, some frustration or some friction or some unhappiness or dissatisfaction, right? They give high priority to call the people and address it. And the second thing is, so we know how often those issues come up, right? So that is one, you can say, dip test, right? Yeah. And the second thing is, sometimes, people report problem, very late. For example, after a failure has been detected, we go and fail in front of a customer, right? And somebody starts doing a root cause analysis or a retrospection for that. Then people speak up and say, at that time, this was the problem. I didn't get this cooperation, and that's why this happened. Right? Most often than not, I go back to their daily report of the day to see, right? To see whether they identified that challenge, that day, or, like I always believe in this, right? Everybody is wisest in their grave. Right? Many times we learn from our experience, but don't want to give credit to that experience, right? And we want to always say that I knew it already. So especially when you fail, a lot of people say they knew it already. Yeah. We always go back to their daily report of that day to see whether they have reported the challenge that day, or whether there is anything to even indicate they spotted a problem on time. Right. So if the person has not, we tell them, we all have learned from that experience. So why don't let's stop finger pointing. Because if I know somebody is going to fail, my primary job is to go and discuss with them and warn them, and at least speak out. Right? If we don't do that, and after we fail, we finger point, that's a very, very bad. It's like politics, right? So we basically coach people to make sure. Either they speak up or keep their peace forever.
Keep their peace forever. So Kumar, another question. You mentioned about failures, and you had earlier said you celebrate failures. Can you give some examples of what happened and how you reacted, etc.?
Every day it happens. I'll give you an example. We have a very large enterprise customer, right? So there is a general practice that we don't do any update to the production system during live business hours, right? And there is also a practice that a member of the development team, right, does not access the customer production system directly, right? Any patch that has to be updated in the production system goes through the support team, right? Now, this is a very large enterprise customer and one of our top customers. They were facing a performance degradation in their system, and this is peak business hour, right? And they reach for urgent help. And in the enthusiasm of solving the problem, one of our developers did something and tested it in his system and saw significant performance improvement. And he goes and, the customer's IT guy is very eager to get the solution. He is right away giving the access to this guy. This guy goes and updates this patch in the customer production environment. And then the system, instead of degraded performance, it stops working. And the customer has a downtime of 30 minutes. Right? So in my work experience in 94, 95, if I had done that, right? And I have had friends in my HCL days who have managed such projects for large companies as managers. This guy, the developer who did this, his right to check in source code into the repository will be withdrawn. And he has to go for a process orientation training again, right? And the manager will probably talk to him for a couple of hours to understand how he did this. In fact, I have had a manager when I worked in a multinational company where, he used to tell me the reason he does this 2 hours of explain to me how he did this is to, he will ask that same question 10 times saying he doesn't understand, and he will be doing some other work, asking the same question again and again. The guy will repeat the same thing, how he did it for 10 times. He will say, because he does that, he will, remember this and not do it, not repeat it. So that's the kind of, in many software companies, that's the level to which punishment goes, as if this person willingly did this. There is a urgency from customer, there is an enthusiasm to solve the problem. And if things didn't go right, probably everybody will be happy. We would have delivered delight to the customer, but things went wrong. Now, by blaming that guy, we are not going to achieve anything, right? Other than putting him down or, destroying his morale or pride or whatever, right? So what we look at it is, how can we tighten the process, right? So, like I spoke to my CTO, right? Because that escalation did come to me. Right, I told him, how can we make sure, for example, we have something called a service user login for our solution. So any GoFrugal employee can log into the system, customer's production system, to service. So we are now improving our solution to say only specific individuals, among the service people, in support can log in, and we will know who is the specific individual. So because as we gain more enterprise customers, we said that we will have audit log of who did it, what they did, and who logged in. And, if required for certain kind of activity, there is a second level approval also on the production system. So we used this incident to look at how we strengthen our processes by involving this individual also. So in fact, my response to him is lack of a system. See, if there is a system like this individual will say, I can't access production system. And this individual will say, I need this approval, QA approval before I deploy this in production system. So we said lack of this system is what gave that, you can say unlimited access to that individual, which resulted in a failure. So we will now, be a more mature organization in terms of strengthening our process and strengthening our tools, so that people are slowed down at the right places, right, in the interest of serving the customer the best.
Thanks, Kumar. Thank you.
I can give you hundreds of examples, because companies like us are built. We fail 1,000 times and succeed 10 times. We become a big company. So we are built on failures.
Built on failures. Kumar, I just wanted to touch on a completely another aspect about, you spoke about you don't call your managers managers, you actually call them coach. Why is that? And, so what message are you trying to communicate?
Yeah, thank you for asking this question. See, the first thing is, people start asking for, we have done this. We want to celebrate. We want to celebrate in an outing. We want to celebrate by going to a bar and or dinner or whatever, right? So when I see, I used to play cricket. Right? A cricketer actually celebrates during the game. Right? Even when a team is losing the World Cup finals, till the last ball is bowled, they don't put a sad face or a sorry face and walk around like a dead corpse or something like that, right? They play with full energy and they fight and they celebrate. They cheer each other up, right? When a professional cricketer does that, when we are a professional software engineer or professional salesman, why we are always working with our face, not with a smiling face, and we think only when we get out of the office we can celebrate. So how do we celebrate when we are working? Right. So that is a very important thing. So we started to be compared to a sports team. So how does a sports team work? Right. So in our office, for example, clapping and whistling are all allowed when we worked in the office. Right. So when the guy wins his first order, you can hear people clapping and whistling and all in the office, right? Because all forms of celebration, that are professional, right? And the whistling is professional inside the office for us, right? So that is the starting point, right, of the comparison with the sports team. Right, then we said, how is the sportsman learning his skills? He is not listening to lectures from a coach. Right? The coach is coming in and observing him play. Right? And the coach is showing him how to play. Coach is recording how he plays and showing him what corrections to make. Right? And the coach is there, he is observing and he is showing, demonstrating. Right? And that is how he is coaching the people. Why should our profession be different? How can I tell people, I will teach you my software in a whiteboard and you go and sell the software, right? So, a manager, means follow-ups, right? And the manager means, like if he is a team manager, then the people who are being managed become a resource. Right. So how can we take that out and say that, as a coach, your job is to make every team member not only perform to their potential, but make every team member do what they thought is not possible by them. That is only possible by showing and demonstrating and making them believe, and by working with them and by observing them, by giving them tips and by appreciating them for the things that they do better and all these things, right? So that is why we moved away from using managers and started calling them coaches.
Thank you. There are quite a few questions in the chat. So Kumar, are you okay to take questions now from the audience?
Sure.
Abhijit, I see your question up here. Do you want to unmute and ask?
Okay, hi Sukuman. This is Abhijit here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, Abhijit.
So you have mentioned you have around 30,000 client base and approx 300 plus support staff, which includes your admin support plus your sales team. So somewhat like my equation, I may be wrong. It looks like your support and services or the delivery team to support 30,000 people cut across all the geography and almost like around the clock support is somewhat a very, very squeezed resource mix. So do we face any problem in terms of support volume or submitting the customer expectation in responding on time and quality of the support you are providing?
See, support, can say there are always challenges, but as we speak, I can say, for example, when the pandemic started, our support teams, each team would have been rated between 3.6 to 3.9 every day on a scale of 5 by customers, where about 50 to 60% of the customers rate the support. So when 50 to 60% customers rate the support, our average daily rating will be between 3.6 to 3.9. Whereas during the pandemic, we have made significant improvements, and it is between 4.25 to 4.7, and about 2/3 of the customer rate it now. So long story short, what I tell, even some of my customers say, like they want more hand holding, or they want more time from us and things like that. I tell them, if I give you more time, I will charge you more. Whereas if I make the product self-serviceable, right, and help you do a lot more preventive maintenance, you pay less. So which one would you like, right? So that is the kind of question we ask our customers. So from the time GST was launched, we were on a mission to make a lot of the support self-serviceable with a 1 to 2 minute video, and also did a lot of IoT kind of thing, so that the product itself can identify issues that are going to come up, which will result in a breakdown or a degradation in performance, and can file tickets in the system with the ownership assigned to customer or us, depending on the nature of the ticket. So basically, to give you a short answer, we focused a lot more on quality. We focused a lot more on self-service. We focused a lot more on preventive maintenance, and we focused a lot more on basically simplicity of the solution, so that support is always under control. In the last 5 years, one thing I am proud of is we have probably more than tripled our customer base, but our support team size has only seen 20% growth. That's the quality improvement we continuously make.
Thanks, Kumar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Harini, you had a question.
Yes. Hi, Kumar. Good to listen to your story today, a little more than what we heard in the previous conversation that we had. So one question is, a lot of your practices are are novel, obviously, novel, unique, and very interesting. What I'm curious to know is, what's the genesis? That is, do you have a think tank who come up with how does an interesting idea come, and how does it become a practice that you really get people to do?
See, I think you got to understand that this is 30 years work. And probably 30 years I have worked 6 days a week, and I don't take many holidays, right? So that is one thing you should appreciate. So these are not, how much ever I would like to believe it's overnight, right? So you make mistakes. See, one thing is I have this habit of observing people. Right? So when I worked in IIT Madras, what do right and what did he not do right? Right? When I worked in Hewlett Packard, what did my managers there do right, didn't do right? When I worked in Intel and Qualcomm in the USA, right? So like this, I have made sure whatever in these environments were done right, we just copied and implemented it. Whatever were not done right, at least I don't repeat it, and I keep telling people not to repeat it.
Putting your experiences to practice.
And most importantly, I have a sort of a genuine interest, right? Meaning the intent to be the happiness first is, genuine, and the intent for people to have that, right? Because when they have the ownership mindset, I am enjoying its benefits. Right? It is actually, a lot of selfishness. Your phone never rings, right? Nobody cares about you. They are empowered to do their job. In fact, in 2000, I used to take pride, whenever there are visitors, there used to be 3 phones in my table. those days there used to be a thing called IPLC. We had a telephone line with a US number, my mobile phone and my EPABX phone, 3 phones. And when I do a 2-hour or 3-hour meeting, I used to tell people, see, I never got a call. Right? So when I go to meet businessmen who give me a 1-hour appointment and they get 10 calls on their intercom and mobile phone and other things, I actually used to pity them. Right? Because it's not worth having a life like that, right? You can't even spend 1 hour with somebody in peace and you will get called 100 times. So I think, in fact, I can say there is one thing is I don't get to be called so often by anybody. And this is something that suits me then, right?
You have more time to think of more strategic stuff rather than being disturbed for escalations.
Yeah.
Day to day. Yeah. Thanks, Kumar. Anu, you
I
had a
hope
question.
Harani's question is answered.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I also.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned that when you started your company, you were already following some practices which are now called agile practices, right? And I had a similar experience in my work also. So I'm curious to know what were those practices that you were following?
See, the number one principle of agile is people over process and tools, right? So definitely when we started, we paid a lot more attention to people. Process and tools were evolved based on people experiences, based on people failure. Even the example I gave you, because we put people first, we were able to evolve the process and tools, right? And the second agile principle is customer collaboration versus over contract negotiation, right? So from the very beginning, because see, we were nobodies in the business when we started in the first floor of my house. So if somebody is willing to trust us and give us some work, right? How do we understand what they want and how do we exceed their expectation in doing what they want, right? So, and we also see, when I started, I was 25 and my team members are all 21, 22 or even 20, right? The initial hires. So that made us about customer need or anything, right? So we were learning even what to do from the customers, right? So the customer collaboration versus contract negotiation piece, then working code versus comprehensive documentation. That happened by accident because, the people we hired initially, maybe including myself, we were not good in documenting anything. Right? Somehow we will, by trial and error, we managed to do the work, right? So that is something we followed. Like that, if you take any of the 4 agile principles, right, either by choice or by accident, or by compulsion, we were following all of them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kumar. That's one of our favorite things at Semco Sales Institute. We say when it comes to agile, the first tenet says people over process, but unfortunately, most companies have made agile as a process and imposed it on people. Correct?
Yeah, in my view, process should be common sense.
Oh yeah,
It should be fluid and well integrated into the habit.
So, Kumar, another question here. Suresh, do you want to go ahead and ask him?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kumar. Wonderful input. My question was, you mentioned senior people getting their roles, working on multiple projects, being specifically cross-functional. And you also spoke about managers being called coaches. What is your design to, building cross-functional teams, especially as people are at senior levels? What's your design for cross-functional organizations?
Actually, the way, see, there are 2 things. When I say cross-functional, for example, we take a mobile app launch, right? So now there is a developer QA and a business analyst, and there is a UI UX designer. There are then there is a product marketing guy. Then there is a website. It has to be launched in the website. So there is in the website there are designers, there are content writers. then there are developers, right? So if you see a simple thing like launching a product, then there are people who decide the packaging and pricing. There are people who are going to support the product. Right now, only when all of these things are ready, right, we can really go ahead and launch it. So that means a product development, a mobile app development, for example, may start with the product manager, a business analyst, and whatever are the development resources needed. But in the last couple of months of the launch, we involve a marketing guy and a customer success guy to start giving the app in trial basis to customers to know the initial customer reactions and perfect the product. And and as it progresses, then we involve the website guys, we involve the marketing people, and we involve then the sales and support people. So the team progressively keeps getting expanded. And as we involve each one of these persons, it is not like we sort of trust the product on them. We actually, we use this concept called the next operation as customer, right? That means that when you are involving the next guy who is closer to the customer, you treat him like a customer. So we give it to that guy, and that guy will now start saying, these areas are good in this product, these areas are not good. Why are you missing these features? Without these features, market won't take it. Then we deliberate that, and we may even sometimes go back to the drawing board and design some more things and launch the product. And so we progressively keep expanding the team. And finally, when it culminates into the launch, including our partners are part of it, right? So the step before the final launch, we even give it to our partners, ask them to experience the product, ask them to share their suggestions. We tell them, we discuss the pricing with them. And finally, it goes for a launch. So, basically, only because we follow this kind of a process, everybody knows that they had their time to share their feedback, ask their questions, right? And get the responses and satisfy themselves, agree to disagree, but commit, right? So that is how we, the many projects involve cross-functional team. Thank you.
Thanks, Kumar. So along with that, so Suresh was asking you about senior people, how cross-functional team, etc. Another question saying that you bring in senior people into the organization, maybe into the management team. How do you make sure that they imbibe with your philosophy? Correct. The management process, the culture.
See, there are in our number one is we have a recruitment process, right, where we have 1 hour, 1.5 hour discussion dedicated to we call that a peer discussion, and it is the purpose of that is to verify the cultural alignment of the candidate, whether the candidate will align to our culture, right? So the way we assess that and come to a decision is by asking the candidate. The candidate speaks most of the time in this. Asking the candidate how he goes about his work in the current organization, or in the job he liked the best in his previous organizations. So what is the role he loved the best? And what did he really enjoy in that job? And what are the challenges or things he did not like? How did he go about doing his job? Right? And so that gives us a clear view of what is the culture the candidate likes, what is the cultural element he enjoys, what are the cultural elements or people practices or organization issues, the challenges he faces, and things like that. So now if we find a 60-70% cultural match on majority of the things, our person who is interviewing also explains to him how our culture is different. What are the things we do differently? For example, if somebody says in the earlier job, they got a 3-month training before they started doing the work. Our person will later in that discussion will explain that we don't give any such training. Learning responsibility is on you, and this is how you learn. There may be a 5-10 minute explanation and discussion on that. And we will ask the candidate, whether the candidate is fine with by learning in this process. If he says yes, he is fine, we then go to asking him, has he learned anything on his own? Right? Has he shown the inquisitiveness or the intent or the appetite to learn something on his own? How did he learn that? Right? So we do this cultural assessment. At least I would say, we in none of the interviews we succeed 100% of the time, but at least we succeed 50-60% of the time. That is a good thing, right? And the second thing is, when I always believe the best way to expose a new culture to people is to give them a culture shock. Right? So this change will happen slowly, gradually, doesn't work, right? Any change, we have to measure the impact, but people have to get shock. Then survival, instinct takes over, and the people really do well. So that means when freshers join, we tell them you are no longer in a classroom, and your boss is not your teacher, right? You are a professional on day one. Grow up, right? That's a strong message we give. Similarly, when we take lateral hires also, we reiterate these aspects, and we make sure they get this shock and they get over it, and they align.
Interesting. Thanks, Kumar. We'll open the floor for audience. Anybody who has a question can unmute and ask Kumar. Sendil, you're on mute.
Sorry. I just had a question, the last one. Like when you said that, like people usually say that the laminar flow is kind of stable and the turbulent flow is like unstable. But you are kind of different, right? Like you said, the change which is like slow and steady doesn't work. It has to be like a shock. It's coming like a shock for me as well. Like can you tell me like more in detail about that? Like why do you think a shock kind of works and the slow and steady thing doesn't kind of work?
Because we always have our daily chores, so we procrastinate. Right? For example, you want to start doing physical workouts. You say tomorrow, coming Monday, next Monday, from the 1st of next month. Right? That's how most of us are, because we are programmed to procrastinate. Right? So when, in fact, the best story I tell about change management is the frog in the well story. All of you would have heard that, right? So what happens when you put a frog and heat the water slowly, and what happens when the frog jumps into water that is already hot? Which one survives? Only the frog that jumps into hot water survives. So we have seen that, in fact, I have two practical experiences in this, both by force of circumstances. So number one is when India introduced GST, 3 weeks before GST, GoFrugal offered 24/7 phone support to its customers since inception in 2004. Right? In 2017, July 1st was the introduction of GST, and May 12th, we take a decision that we are going to cut off phone support. And I think around June 1st or June 12th, we totally cut off phone support to all customers. This GST transition, this is not a one-day event, right? Because the government's GST rules themselves are evolving, and there are many changes and amendments coming. And if you have to support customers by phone call and visits, die doing that. So we said, everybody, we built a chatbot called Chitty, and we put the bot to work. We put chat support. All customers only chat support. Nobody gets call support, however big the customer is, period. So we made this huge progress towards self-help, and during the first 1 or 2 months of this GST transition, there were some backlashes and something, but it turned out after 3-4 weeks, all my competitor support agent can't even talk. They had a throat problem, and our people were all working happily in the office. In fact, our people stayed in the office from sometime like May 15th till September 30th, you know, at least 30, 40 guys slept in the office, and we served 3 times meals. People used to go home at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. So GST was a celebration in our office. Right? It became a memorable experience for in the office because we chose the self-service. We said, you know, in a market like India, which people say is a do-it-for-me market, which people say is a voice market, if I tell you GoFrugal does not have voice support, less than 1% of customers in GoFrugal buy voice support by paying an additional fee from 2017 June for 4 years now, and our business has been growing. Will you believe that? But that's the truth. So I would say, as a company, GoFrugal used GST to the fullest by withdrawing phone support to all its customers. Because it didn't affect our revenue, it didn't affect our growth. It has only made us and made sure I did not expand my support team at all in these 4 years. Right? That is a proof that, you know, this shock treatment worked. And the second example I will give is the pandemic era, you know, the new normal, the digital thing that is taking place now. Right? The same retail customer, we have been benefit to survive. It's not about growth, it's about survival. If you don't deploy digital solution, you are not going to be in business. We have used threat, fear, creating fear, motivation, every technique. We could never get their mind share or real intent. You know, they will only appreciate us, not deploy the solution. But what did the pandemic do to them? You know, they started calling proactively to find out how to digital, you know, how to do digital transformation. Right? Everybody became aware that, you know, if you don't deploy the right technology and transform themselves digitally, you know, their numbers, their days as a store owner is numbered. Fast. So, you know, these retailers who are in a frog in a well became frog that were thrown into hot water because of this pandemic. So in my view, you know, we have to, the way we do, you know, I personally do change management is understand the change, appreciate all the change, do a cost benefit analysis. How do you do risk mitigation and all that? Have a cutoff date, and from that cutoff date, you know, the change happens. I can also give you a counter example. For example, you know, when we said a daily report about 8 or 9 years back, and I was just telling people, I tried doing the change slowly. So I was telling people, you know, if, you know, within 3 months, if you don't send the daily report, it will mark you as absent and this and that. Most people won't send daily report. I used to keep lecturing. I used to keep sending myself and showing them, right? Whereas on one day we said, you know, if you don't send daily report, you are really marked as absent and it will reflect in your payroll. All daily reports start coming. You know, I felt like I wasted probably 100 days of my precious time trying to encourage and motivate the change rather than forcing the change. So I think it's best to do the homework and have a cutoff date and make the change happen. That's what works.
Yeah, I had one more question, if I may. I mean, you spoke about you know, people burning the midnight oil, you know, really struggling through the GST, and it becoming a, you know, epochal event for the organization. In those kind of environments, how do you see rewards and recognition how do you use rewards and recognition as a motivation perspective? Do you see that, or do you expect people to be aligned? What's your
so there are two aspects to it, right? One is recognition, second one is reward. I would say as a company, we have always been quick to recognize but slow to reward. Right? So what I mean by that is when we see leadership in people, when we see people can have higher potential than what they are doing, we really try to identify larger opportunities or give them a bigger role and responsibility and things like that. Movement we sort of do anytime, any day during the year. So we don't wait for anything. right? So that means the moment we see potential, talent, and commitment, we recognize people, right, in terms of giving them increased responsibility or role or whatever. Whereas when it comes to reward, we only do the performance appraisal, once a year. So that's the only time we reward, and as much as possible we are fair, and we take the individuals feedback and do it as far as possible.
Thank you.
All right. Excellent. Anything else? Any other questions from anybody else? So Kumar, in the current pandemic time when remote work has been the norm, is GoFrugal facing any unique challenges of when people work remotely? What kind of challenges and what has been your approach in general?
No, I think mainly because of this ownership mindset I talked about, the freedom people have and the empowerment we wanted to give for a long time. I think all along we were not that much micromanaging people. Right? So that has really helped us in the pandemic, because I would say I have been very fortunate that the team takes so much responsibility, and everybody wants to do well for the team and for themselves and for the company. Right? So there is a good, so I'm not aware of any specific challenge or something, because nobody has brought anything up to me saying, because of the pandemic, this is a challenge or something, right?
Very good to know. Yeah.
So if I can say anything, it is only that in support, I told you how we have improved in the quality of support. In every other, every product, every service we provide, right? I must say that, many of our people had, family members or close friends falling sick and COVID and other things, right? But as a company, we didn't skip a beat. And if anything, we have only become a much better company today than what we were in 2020, March 15th, when we announced work from home.
Excellent. So, like you said, since you never believed in micromanagement, remote working, plus you had a culture of ownership, remote working didn't, impact you.
In fact, people are working with more ownership now than before, is one thing I can say proudly, because I think that's the magic trust can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I actually connected question on the remote working. See, a lot of these practices that you said, I'm sure the physical presence in office, correct, would have contributed to make that happen. Did you see any change when you went remote in terms of, let's say, following certain practices with a complete, I would say, compliance or enthusiasm? Like, for example, daily reports or anything that is kind of integral to your work culture. Was there any impact on them? Did you have to recalibrate or redesign some of those practices, or they just work seamlessly in the remote space?
Yeah, actually, for example, one thing that adoption has improved quite a bit and quality has improved quite a bit is this daily report. And like yesterday, I had a meeting with our pandemic hires, right? People who were offered, joined, onboarded. They have never seen anybody in office. All the pandemic hires. I had a meeting, and I was asking them about how the work has been and what they miss and what are the challenges they face and things like that. About 10 or 11 people spoke in the meeting, right? And about 5 of them mentioned that they love writing the daily report. Right? One girl even mentioned that the daily report is like journaling, and it does a lot of good to her own mental health. Right? Another guy from the hospitality industry mentioned that, when he looks back at what he has done in the day, what he has learned, whom did he help or whom he wants to appreciate and things like that, right? And it really enhances his learning, right? So when these people were talking about how much they enjoy the daily report, that was sort of like music to my ears, because at the initial time when we launched it, people were very hesitant. In fact, if you go back to our old Glassdoor reviews and things like that, people will say, oh, daily report. They have a daily report culture as if that's a very bad and ugly thing to do, right? But I have seen people who write better daily report, people who who cannot even write a sentence in English properly. If they do 100 days of daily report, their quality of English and their quality of communication improves tremendously. Right? Their confidence to express increases tremendously. So there are so many benefits I have seen, and this is one thing which got, I would say 100% compliance and significant improvement in quality due to the pandemic. So in terms of, challenges, specifically, as I said, definitely some of our coaches and new joinees do face some challenges in the sense that, when they need help, getting that help takes a little longer. Is one of the challenge people express. Because if the person is sitting next to them, irrespective of whatever they are doing, you can interrupt them and talk to them. Whereas when somebody is sitting remote, right, you can put a message for our collaboration, or you call, people may choose not to respond or, and be focused on their work. So every individual can manage their, interruptions or disturbances. In the office, people struggle to manage interruptions or disturbances. So in that area, while people who need help may feel a little bit frustrated due to the time it takes, I am with the people who are, I always used to tell in the office also, you have to have this me time, put a do not disturb board and focus on your work instead of, being available for all the people all the time. If you do that, you can't do focused work. So I am encouraging practices like, having a little longer daily stand-up. So you front load and ask whatever help you want in advance, or having another designated time of half an hour or 45 minutes for the coach, where whoever has questions can reach him instead of reaching all the time. And I am even encouraging people to not reach for help as soon as you face a problem, right? Struggle, give up, or have recommended solution before you reach for help. So these are some things where we are trying to turn this challenge into an opportunity for development and growth.
Thanks, Kumar.
Thank you.
On that,
my question was, Kumar, like, the question that everybody has right now, are you planning to go back to the office again 100%, or are you going to be working from home? What's the plan?
Yeah, we did a survey about 3 weeks back. So this is something I decide myself, even though I'm an old traditional guy who would like to see everybody in the office, right? So something unique came up in the survey. In our office, for example, we asked 2 questions, 2 important questions out of the 8 other questions, totally 8 questions. So one is a short-term preference for people. Short-term means we defined it up to September 30th. The other is the long-term preference from October 1st onwards. So till September 30th, 70% of our people wanted to work from home. And only 12% of the people wanted to come to office. 18% wanted hybrid. Okay. And in terms of, so we said whoever wants to come to office can come. Office is open till September 30th. So on voluntary basis. And I think today I'm sitting in the office because some construction work at home. I see less than hardly 10 people in the office today. Right? And the second question is from October 1st, which is our long term. What is your preference? So in that, 50% wanted hybrid. And about 30% wanted work from office, 20% wanted work from home. So our plan now is, probably before September 30th, we want to evolve our policies for the new normal, right? So because, we want to have the right balance between the individual preference and the company and team need, so that we tell the teams what days or how many days in the week they should work. All the team members should work from office versus remaining days is at their choice. And how do we balance that so that the individual preference is met, at the same time the team or company also doesn't suffer. So for me, this is the thing is that for the last about we can say 18 months, by the time it is September, 18 months our team would have worked from home, and the GoFrugal would have operated with 350 offices. So when we go from 350 offices to, let us say, 3.5 offices, that's an easier transition, right? Going from 1 or 2 offices to 350 offices was the hardest transition. So we have done that successfully, and the transition that is coming up is a simpler transition, and I'm very confident we will, we are co-creating this process. So we will co-create this process and these policies and guidelines so that it becomes a big hit among our people.
Before we close, one last question. I see a question from Senthil. Maybe with that we can. Senthil, go ahead.
So when you said about daily report, like, is there a prompt that appears kind of and they write it something? So is it like an open blank sheet? They fill it up. Because sometimes.
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Okay. That's the question.
See, it is. We have an app called MyDelight, which is used by all our team members. For example, our field team can do everything they have to do related to their work from that app itself. So we also use a tool that we have built in-house for everybody to use. So daily report is just one menu in that. There is no prompt or anything at any time of the day. They just they have to open that menu and fill things up. So there is a template available. For example, the emotion of the day, and there is a text for that. Then what are your achievements for the day? No achievements, learnings, challenges. I am happy to help. Who are the people you helped? I appreciate. Who are the people you appreciate for the work you did during the day? Right? Like that, there are about 8 or 10 fields in that thing, which are more about, you introspect and you write what you feel. Right? So those are the kind of questions that are there. And then for people who are in a more transactional customer-facing role, like customer success, online sales, and onboarding and things like that, whatever they did during the day, right? For example, when in their phone call, when they attend official calls, the call gets recorded and stored in our cloud system, and they do entry for that. So that kind of transaction reports also get automatically appended to their daily report. So the coaches can see the daily report on what customer they engaged with and what was the outcome and things like that. So the basic thing is this template helps them express their emotion, celebrate their success, learn from their failures, express, develop gratitude in them, and call out to the people who helped. So one thing I keep telling people is, it is important to help people, at the same time take help. We neither want parasites, nor want, selfless service or people who die serving other people, right? Both are very bad, right? So we help people make sure they have a balance, right? Because I also believe, the sense of gratitude really builds humility, and it promotes collaboration and cooperation between people.
Absolutely.
So this appreciation is very important to do in that.
Kumar, this daily report is transparent to everybody in the organization, is it? Everybody.
We tell them to copy their team. So everybody, automatically some things are set. For example, somebody belongs to the Karnataka team. The Karnataka manager, Karnataka team member all get Karnataka team, everybody, there are 5 members, all 5 gets all the report. And the sales head's daily report is copied to his entire team. The All India head's daily report goes to everybody. So everybody gets to read their boss's daily report.
That's transparency. That's very
so
good.
The team members will go to only his team. And the team member, when he raises a challenge or when he appreciates somebody or when he worked with some other team, he can also copy those teams or those individuals.
That's fascinating.
So typically, for example, somebody says one of my decision upset them, they can copy me on the daily report and put it in the daily report saying, I did this and they were upset.
I recall you saying that, there is no hierarchy in your organization, right? And then like what you said now, a boss's report is sent to everybody in the team. A boss's daily activity report goes to everybody in the team. It's one example of what you're saying, that there is no fear in your team.
Yeah.
We didn't have much time to elaborate that aspect of what you were saying, but a lot of unique, interesting, empowering practices.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Thank you for sharing that. We are at the top of the hour, and maybe we should conclude with Muni. You wanted to, I thought you summed it up very well. If you can unmute and speak out, maybe that can be the good end.
I was making some notes as you were speaking, very, very unique things. And I felt that concepts that we read or hear and things like that, but how well do we practice and how well do you make sure that it becomes the culture than anything else and everlasting behavioral changes that you expect the team members to demonstrate. So very unique insights, very successful examples that you were able to quote and make us believe that yes, it is very much possible to give a shock than a gradual way of bringing changes. But thank you. A lot of things are very customized to your business maybe, but that's the question I have in my mind now, to go and do some more homework myself on some of the things that I am pursuing. So thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Muni. Thanks for summing it up so nicely. Again, thanks for joining us, all fellow cosmonauts. That's what I have a term for all the people who come for Cosmic. As always, we'll have another exciting speaker the 3rd Friday of August as well. And Kumar, you are very welcome to join us in our sessions and share, be part of the community where we all believe in empowering our teams and so that everybody comes up with their fullest potential. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you very much for the opportunity and have a wonderful evening and a happy weekend. Thank you.
Thanks, Kumar. Thank you.